안녕하세요 여러분, 켄트김의 용기백배. 오늘은 저의 오랜 20년 지기 비크람 카샵이라는 친구의 어떤 그 얘기를 들어보도록 하겠습니다. 이 친구는 실리콘밸리에서 굉장히 경험이 많고요. 다양한 정말 여러 가지 일을 겪었는데 오늘 이 친구의 어떤 그 앞으로의 미래 그리고 실리콘밸리를 향한 우리 대한민국 청년들이 또 많이 취업을 할 수 있도록 창업을 할 수 있도록 거의 이 태어날 때부터 이 entrepreneur 창업가 정신이 가득 찬 친구입니다. 제 오래된 친구고 저희 하버드 동문이기도 하고 좋은 이야기 들어보도록 하겠습니다. Vikram Kashap.
I am going to speak in English, so hope that's okay. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, what I want to talk about today has to do with what is happening today in Silicon Valley and how entrepreneurs of any type in Korea can tap into what is arguably an explosion of industrial activity that's been happening in Silicon Valley. So basically this is geared towards two types of people. Koreans who are young, typically under the age of 30 or 35, and have some kind of aspirations that are entrepreneurial in nature, and also existing entrepreneurs in Korea who run a business today. So let me begin by just talking a little bit about why I'm even qualified to talk about these topics and why perhaps what I'm saying may make sense to you. In the past, after I graduated from Harvard with Kent, I moved to Silicon Valley to pursue an American dream, like a lot of people do. In that process, I built a company from zero to over 120 people. I also have raised a significant amount of venture capital. I've also worked as a venture capitalist for more than 4 years at a large Silicon Valley venture capital firm. Also, I have most recently had some experiences in Northeast Asia, specifically in Japan and Korea, helping to do both manufacturing type operations here in this region, as well as helping companies expand from this region, large companies helping them expand from this region into the United States. So I'm going to impart, hopefully, some of the lessons that I've learned and perhaps how they might be applicable to somebody who is in your shoes. So let's begin by talking a little bit about the venture capital industry. This is an industry that, when I was working in it, most people hadn't really heard about it, didn't know a whole lot about it. These days, it seems to be attracting a lot of attention. In fact, President Obama has recently said that he would like to actually be possibly a venture capitalist after he leaves the White House. There's a lot more interest in this area. Let's talk about some numbers. So in 2014, there was almost $50 billion that was invested in the United States alone in startup companies in the form of venture capital. In 2015, that number skyrocketed even more to almost $60 billion that's being invested in the U.S. So as you can see, this is no longer kind of a very marginal area in the economy, but has been significantly growing. And if you look at the types of people that are basically utilizing this capital, I think there's a few things that I want to point out. Number one, I think they tend to be young. So if you're young right now and you want to access capital, there's a tremendous amount of capital out there that's betting on young people, not old people. Number two, if you look at the types of businesses that are being created, they're overwhelmingly in software and internet companies. The thing that I want to point out about some of these businesses that are being created, which sometimes you can't really fathom unless you're kind of in what's going on in Silicon Valley, a lot of them are essentially, to use kind of an overused term that a lot of journalists like to use and people in the industry like to use, is they're disrupting older industries, meaning they're coming in with innovative, not just technology, but innovative ways of delivering new products and services. And this is really at the heart of, I think, some of the major trends that are attracting very, very large amounts of capital. You look at companies like Uber, like Airbnb. these are companies that not only, they're fundamentally not necessarily technology companies. They're really innovative businesses that are utilizing resources in ways that are unique, given the amount of penetration we have of the internet, penetration we have of smartphones, penetration we have of information that's flowing across the world. So, I think it's very interesting for anyone to kind of observe what's been going on and see how this can potentially play a role in their lives, not just for people who are in Silicon Valley. Because the other thing I do want to point out is that Silicon Valley is an absolute attractor, a magnet for capital from capital and talent from all over the world. Okay, so if you look at who's investing, who's starting, who's working at these companies, they're not Americans only by any stretch. In fact, some of the biggest names in the entire industry in Silicon Valley are people who are complete foreigners who came to Silicon Valley. And I think that's another theme that I'm going to talk about, which is really the openness of America, which I think makes it kind of unique in terms of its ability to build these kind of businesses. So, obviously this gets a lot of headlines, but I also want to talk a little bit about what are maybe some of the drawbacks of venture capital. It's not all just a rosy picture. Venture capital, there are costs associated with taking venture capital. Oftentimes you have to give up control of your business in some kind of way. There are also some relocation requirements that might be necessary, especially for a lot of venture capitalists that are based in Silicon Valley. Oftentimes they ask that the teams relocate there. But by and large, for somebody who's a young person who doesn't have much experience, who wants to build a big business, this is a very interesting option for anyone to try to tap into and get access to, just as an option. If your goal is to start a business, try to change an industry, or try to make an impact with some new idea that you might have. So, one thing I do want to talk a little bit about is the Apple effect, the Facebook effect. I think what's different today than maybe 10 years ago is that we live in a world now where we're face-to-face. Everyone is face-to-face with technology. You can't avoid it. And, from what I've read, in the 80s, with the advent of the microcomputer, there was a similar phenomenon, but the way it is being weaved into our lives today is unprecedented. I mean, you look at the smartphone. I mean, you go to the subway in Korea, and you watch people, and their eyes are literally glued to their smartphones. And I think the thing, and people have talked about this a lot, the thing about some of these new businesses that are being created is that they're really about kind of creating a new, almost experience for a user and add value to their lives, which is highly enriching through the use of software. Okay, and that's something that in Silicon Valley, that's a huge focus. The vast majority of that $60 billion that I just told you about that was spent last year in venture capital, where did it go? It went into software. And so software, if you understand that business, it's an extremely malleable product. Okay, it defies the convention of a traditional industrial good in that there's really no physical product. What you're creating for someone is something that allows them to do something virtually. It's not in the physical world, other than the taps or clicks that they're using with their fingers or their voice. And so when you think about it, there's a tremendous amount of thought that's been put into software and businesses that can connect people using software. And this is where most of the opportunities, at least to date, have typically lied. And if you look at where, who is kind of driving that, Apple, I think, comes to mind as a company that is basically the portal into a lot of this information. I mean, the iPhone is an iconic piece of hardware that originally just combined, as Steve Jobs said, a phone, an iPod, and a computer. But what it's done is it's given a window into a software world in an absolutely unprecedented way. And I think some of the things that we can learn from the rise of Apple, I think, are generally applicable to anyone who's interested in the technology business in general. So I think one thing that's very clear about Apple is that, and I think most people understand this, is they focus on user experience. And that's something that most businesses focus on, but especially technology businesses, they often don't make it a priority. And what Apple did, I think, that's different than other companies and is quite unique, is that they absolutely made the user experience a priority. The other thing that Apple did is they reduced their products into a very clearly understood set of products. They don't have a vast array of products. I mean, they have products that comprise a PC, a laptop, a server, a phone. But within those categories, they've really narrowed down the product selection to a set of products that are quite efficient in terms of the way they're ordered and put together. If you contrast it, for example, with other PC or device manufacturers, it's rather different. The other thing I think to note is that Apple, from the get-go, is a global company. Apple, if you look at the talent that they hire, the people who work there, they're global. And that's something that I think that any company that aspires to be a global company, they've got to espouse that ethic of being inclusive of many different types of people. Another thing that you see about Apple, and this is very interesting, I've been living in Japan for the last 6 months. From what I heard, I don't know if this is true, I think 60% of the iPhone's components come from Japan. Also, parts of the iPhone come from all over the world, okay? From Korea, from the United States, and other countries as well. And so I think one of the things that also you can learn from Apple is that to have a global supply chain in a business can be extremely powerful. So why am I talking about Apple? Why am I talking about venture capital? My observation over the last few years in working with Korean companies, with Japanese companies, is that there's a significantly different mindset when it comes to thinking about business, particularly technology businesses in this part of the world. And I think that if you look at just the sheer amount of capital, the sheer amount of global companies that are coming out of USA, it's just far larger in scope than any place in the world. And I don't think that ought to be something that is a daunting, something that should be daunting to someone who has aspirations in Korea. Personally, I don't think that Silicon Valley is the only place where technology can be created. It's certainly an excellent place, but it's not the only place. And I think if you are watching this and you are a person who has goals and you want to build a business and you want to do so in a way that allows you to tap into some of the resources that are out there, I'm here to tell you that I think that you can do that. I just think that you may need to step out of your comfort zone and think about how you really can tap into something that's larger. I think one of the things in my observations about Korean and Japanese culture is that the language itself makes it, and the culture itself makes it very difficult to bridge the gap outside of the country. And so if you talk about segeihwa or globalization, it sounds like we live in a globalized world, but the more time I spend with companies and entrepreneurs here, the more I realize we actually live in a very different world. And a lot of the challenges associated with building something that can be global are amplified in a place like Korea. So anyway, I want to talk a little bit about some of the lessons that I've learned, some of my experiences, and maybe some ways that if you have some desire to build a business or start a business or have an existing business, you want to make it more global, I want to give you a few lessons that I've learned. So what have I done? So I have both been working in Korea and Japan, as I mentioned. In Japan, I've been working for a very large software company, extremely large software company, helping them expand outside of Japan. In Korea, I've been working with and advising various smaller companies to help them as well grow outside of Korea, I'm sorry. I also have conducted lectures at Osaka University and Suncheonhyang University on this very topic. So one of the things that I've learned in my experiences in Japan, helping a software company that's done extremely well in Japan, but has not built a business overseas, is that you have to be willing to bring in expertise that is outside of your country. So if you expect that you're from Korea going to be able to build a company that can attract, say, US venture capital or serve US customers, there's no way you can do it with just a Korean team. You have to work with local Americans. Similarly, it would be suicide for an American company to go into Korea or go into Japan with a non-local team. It just doesn't work. And if you underestimate the power of local knowledge, you are betting against a very powerful force. So I meet a lot of Korean entrepreneurs who surround themselves with Korean entrepreneurs. That is a mistake. Or surround themselves with Korean people. That is a mistake. You need to step out and you need to bring advisors, employees, investors in from other countries to give you different perspectives. The second thing I've learned is that there's a very different sales and marketing approach that is employed, especially in a place like Japan. So the sales and marketing that is effective in reaching businesses and consumers, the way it's handled, the methods by which you contact, the way in which relationships are built, the way in which business is conducted is very different than in the United States. And you need to, a lot of people, they think they can take their model. Building a widget in a factory, I think, has perhaps more fungible properties. You can take that process, and it's been proven you can take that process and export it. I don't think you can export your sales and marketing approaches. And this is a mistake that I see time and time again. People think that they can, what they're doing in Korea or in Japan, in my personal experiences, will work in other countries. It actually won't. And if you only think of your business in the same way that you think of your business in your local country, I think you're, again, up for some uphill challenges. One of the other things I've learned is commitment. So it really takes a lot of effort to step out of your comfort zone, out of your culture, out of your language, and try to build a global company. And when I say global company, I'm not even talking about this in terms of some ambitious way. I'm talking about a company that serves customers outside of your own borders. That's what I mean by a global company. It takes a commitment. And on this front, I think a lot of American companies are extremely guilty of not, and I see it all the time as well, of not really trying to be committed to being a company that can be effective outside of America. That when they look at their business, they construct it, they think about it completely in American terms. Now, America, of course, is a magnitude of size larger market than Korea. But if you just confine your thinking to your local area and you're not committed to actively pushing the envelope of your thinking, of your business, outside of your borders, again, I think you're going to not be likely to succeed. And if you look at the companies that have succeeded, unfortunately, I think they're relatively few. Let's talk about in Korea, for example. The chaebols have been successfully able to create an export-oriented industrial base that has certainly helped them grow overseas. And in the United States, Samsung is a household name. LG is a household name. But if you look at the second tier of companies that are not at the very top, and you look at their ability to export their products, I think that there's a lot more opportunity for companies in that second sector. They could be more effective if they were able to solve some of the problems that I think I've identified and articulated just now. So this is a picture of the company I've been working with in Japan, and I think this company is a great example of a company that has been able to retain its core values, its core belief system, while at the same time going overseas. So as you can see from the picture, this is a Japanese company. We debuted our product in the United States at a massive trade show. And at the trade show, we're all wearing happy, or these kind of special coats in Japan that they wear during festivals. I think that one of the things that I do want to point out in what I'm saying is that you shouldn't dilute your essence. You shouldn't dilute what makes you great in the first place. And I think whenever you expand, it's important that you recognize what lies at the heart of your culture and your mission, and you need to retain that. And I think if you lose that, there's some serious dangers that await. I mean, there was a large patent infringement case involving Samsung and Apple, and this is maybe a different topic, around patent infringement, but this is an area where you have to be committed to your own vision, your own level of innovation as a technology company. You kind of live and die by focusing on that. So let me summarize some of the kind of the key recommendations that I would make to you if you're sitting right now somewhere in the world, maybe in Korea, and you're contemplating a business, or you've got a group of people and you think you have a good idea, or you already have an existing business and you want to get it outside of Korea, which I think, by the way, is a very good thing. If you think about expanding outside of Korea, I think not only will that help you grow your business dramatically, because Korea is a very small country, relatively speaking, but it will also improve your thinking and allow you to become a global citizen, which I think is a very worthwhile thing to pursue if you want to be engaged in the broader world. So, first of all, I think you shouldn't constrain your thinking to something that's extremely narrow. You should think in a broader, bigger way. That will get people who you would never have expected to join your cause. So think big. Second thing I'd recommend is be transparent. A lot of people I've seen in this part of the world tend to close the doors on sharing their ideas, sharing what makes their businesses special. And I think one of the things that's unique about Silicon Valley is we share ideas tremendously. There's a lot of transparency when it comes to harnessing the best ideas and leveraging them. And so I recommend that you don't hold things in, but you be more open about what you're doing. The third thing is know your customer. I think that that's something that's a given, but when you go outside your border, then I think the challenges are a little more different. And knowing your customer involves something that you probably don't know, and you need to get help in knowing your customer. sometimes what I've found is that when people get too involved in their own society, their own culture, they are not able to understand what they don't know. They don't know what they don't know. And I think that is a problem that I see time and time again in a place where it's a very much of an echo chamber. You don't have a lot of new ideas, new people, new perspectives coming in. And given the size of Korea, I would recommend that you obtain some way to understand more about the world outside of Korea. That ties into the next point, which is hire foreigners. I highly recommend you hire foreigners. A lot of people, they will shy away from it. They think it's too expensive. They think it's, they won't be able to understand them. That they won't bring enough value to the table. I think you need to get over those concerns and be willing to work with people outside of your own culture, your own comfort zone, people who are totally different than you. My final recommendation is fail. Fail. No great person I've ever met has ever not failed. And if you're not failing, you're not trying. In San Francisco, there's an actual conference called FailCon, which celebrates failure. And I do find that, especially in a place like Korea, where failure is looked upon so negatively, it makes people more risk averse. And in entrepreneurship, you cannot be risk averse. Those who don't step in the ring, those who don't take chances, those who don't embrace risk will never succeed in that ring. So I just encourage you to not be afraid of failure. And in fact, as there's an overused term in Silicon Valley, fail fast. Don't spend 10 years failing, okay? Don't spend all your time for 10 years and fail. But learn how to fail quickly, learn from your mistakes, get back up, and attack the problem again. You will undoubtedly learn if you do that. So that concludes my remarks for now, Ken.
Great.